Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for the radiantVista Daily Critique. This image was submitted by Jürgen, who is an intermediate photographer from Germany. One of the first things I like about this image is the simplicity. There are very simple sort of space shapes and ideas. This wedge at the bottom, the idea of the fence, another space shape in here, and just a little bit of separation, but enough for the main idea, the architectural subject, to be in its own space, the trees, and then the cloud. And I also really like the rhythm that's been created here by the combination of moment, framing, and the panoramic presentation. I love the way that the line of the trees is rhymed by this moment with the line of the clouds, and then the line of the fence. And I also love the rhythm of the fence itself with the construction materials on the external walls of the architectural subject. I'm also enjoying the moment relative to just this time of year, the seed heads out here in the field, an area that could be going very flat. There's contrast here now, and there's the potential to bring in even more contrast because of those seed heads. And I think that's working really well. And I think the classical layout here, taking the main subject and getting it out of the middle and putting it in a dynamic place, I think that's working well. One of the things that's really interesting to me about this image is that black and white is making it very simple, not just from a design standpoint. It's also helping to simplify Jürgen's life in that he's able to take the picture at all by either seeing this in black and white, knowing that he was going to go there, or doing this after the fact. Jürgen's really taken a quality of light that would be very difficult to work with if we presented this in color. This is just direct overhead light. You can see it in the shadows from the post. What's so fascinating is that quality of light is relative to our subject or subjects. It's also relative to how we plan on presenting the image. And I've said this a lot, but I want to say it again looking at this image. If we can learn to do a better job of seeing in monochrome, we can start to work in many more different qualities of light. If you shot this in color, the light would be so flat relative to the colors, and it's so difficult to try and fix that after the fact. The viewer, even if they're not sophisticated at all about photography, it's just almost impossible to take very flat light and then try and create a separation of color based on warm and cool. But in black and white we get away from all that, and what's so amazing about this image is that the quality of light relative to this subject couldn't be any more perfect. It's almost uncanny looking at this. The fence, instead of being very flat, the way the light is coming down and hitting, all these posts are backlit, so they're very dark, so it's creating on the post relative to the board right here that's real beautiful contrast that helps the fence to have more visual weight instead of less. Same thing is happening on the building. You've got a dimensional light. Even though it's very hard, you've got a light that is congruent with this camera angle to shoot the building, with this highlight on the leading edge, almost like you'd do in a studio if you were lighting someone's face, and then the light falls off over here. So just really cool to see the combination of black and white here, and how this hard quality of light relative to the subject is really creating a beautiful pattern. If we just have to consider the value and not the overlay of color. And so I want to say something else about the idea of black and white. A lot of the new cameras now have a black and white mode where you can preview in black and white, and that's great. But something else I'd encourage you to really think about, particularly if you're just getting into digital photography and you never shot film, is that in addition to thinking about seeing the world in monochrome and understanding that you can shoot black and white in many, many, many more situations than you can trying to work traditionally in color, but learn something about the tradition of shooting in black and white film. And here's what I'm talking about. One of the first things I want to do to improve this image is sort of create a vignetting mask all the way around. One of the things that's happening for me is as strong and graphic as the main subject is, and the fence line and the tree, there's a lot of sort of muddy light gray that's happening along the edges, and that pulls me out of the image. And I'd like to make that much more dramatic along the edges to contain the eye and keep the eye in here. And one of the first things that I think of is not just so much about the idea of making this darker as some kind of visual design isolated, relative to visual harmony. I look at that, and what I think of is my old days of shooting 4x5 black and white sheet film and the zone system and black and white filters. I think about putting a red filter on and shooting this shot. And when we used to shoot black and white film, if you took a very heavy colored filter, like a heavy red filter, the colors that were the opposite of the filter would get much darker and the same colors would get much lighter. It was a way to manipulate value at the level of capture. And you can see this theory if you have a color file and you go in and you click on channels. You can sort of train yourself to see that. But I want to say something that I've said a bunch of times. If you're really into photography, you might really consider getting a film camera. You can get them for almost nothing now. You can get out-of-dated film for almost nothing. And just play around a little bit with the idea of film. I think it has the potential to give you a whole nother sort of language, a whole different level of being able to pre-visualize the way to see reality based on the history of the way we used to sort of preview scenes, coming from a film play. So just a thought, just an idea. In addition to the vignetting mask, there are a few other basic things that I want to do here. I'd like to create more local contrast in the flat areas of the field. I'd like to create some fingers of light, sort of feelings of movement into the main subject. And I'll talk about the rest of the things that I want to do as we make the changes. The very first thing that I did was a very dramatic curves adjustment that I then applied because that was done with an adjustment layer, and I applied it with a mask. And I said I'm going to be doing more of this, and I'll do it when I feel like it's helpful or appropriate. I'll show you my curves adjustment here. I chose as the points for my curve. Let me cancel this for a second and turn the eyeball off. These are the points that I chose. Let me do something here real quick so that I see what's happening. That's fine. I chose the cloud as one point on the curve, this gray as another point on the curve, and then almost a medium gray as another point on the curve. The idea was that I wanted to separate and create much more local contrast in these areas where you had a lot of light gray without much contrast. And so that meant that